Good afternoon. Welcome everyone. For some of you coming back for this weekly think tank, and I suspect I see some new names. Because this is open space and it is a think tank, you're welcome to start your videos. You can decide to mute and unmute yourself whenever there's opportunity for you to be present. But it will be really, really great for me to see faces. If you're unable to use your video, that's also okay. But it will be nice to see faces that I don't need to look at my own face the whole time. So I'm sure there will be more people joining. Some people said that they will be joining late. What I would love to start off with is, like I said, I see new people here in the room, and welcome. If this is your first think tank, some of you would know I've been hosting these since, I think it was the second last week of March. I would love to hear where you are in the world and your role, and what made you curious to want to participate in today's session, specifically as we focus and zoom in on HR automation and digitization. And just remember to unmute yourself. I see Denise, you don't have your microphone enabled, so you might just want to have a look at your Zoom settings. And while you are sorting that out, who would love to just jump in, just share a little bit about who you are, where you are, what your role is?
I will start.
Thank you, Edwina.
Hi, I'm new. Look, I am following everyone on the WhatsApp group. So I think when I saw this topic, it sort of sparked some interest. So I'm a human capital business partner for a very big corporate medical aid, healthcare, stroke financial services industry. And I say I'm part of a very big human capital group, and we are embarking on to understand post-COVID, moving forward. Are we going to digitize our processes on various platforms? And is this more of a permanent way of work? So when I saw this topic, I'm actually very eager to see what others' thinking is, or what research is saying, or practice.
Awesome. Okay, and whereabouts are you based, Edwina?
I'm in Bellville.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm in Cape Town.
Okay, 100%. Thank you, and welcome. Who's next?
I'll go next. Hi, Liesel. This is Sherwin speaking.
Hi, Sherwin. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm currently in Port Elizabeth, but I'm permanently based in Johannesburg. Yeah, I'm an independent human capital consultant, previously technology background, but I use the word pivoted now to more HR process consulting. So yeah, I was just curious about, to Edwina's point, how other companies are currently doing it. It's definitely not a new topic. So where we are as a country in various organizations, just to see how different countries are actually dealing with this topic now, because we're almost forced to go this way. So yeah, just to share and contribute and also connect with like-minded professionals in the space. So very excited.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here, and looking forward to your participation as well. Anyone else that want to jump in and share a little bit about themselves?
Hi, Liesel. It is my first think tank. I'm very excited to chat to like-minded individuals. I am a people operations manager for a telecommunications business. And obviously the topic piqued my interest, given the fact that we, are dealing with COVID-19 and transitioning into a lot more employees that are work from home, and, digitizing our processes so that we effectively meet the employee and employer requirements. So I'm interested to see what this topic will unfold and look like, and share ideas between like-minded HR individuals. So I'm very excited, and thanks for having me.
Okay, 100% and welcome. And I'm also curious, you know, being open space, we never know what will we more or less know the conversations and the priorities, but we never know what will come up. So I'm also always curious. Anybody else want to jump in? No? Okay. So for many of you, this is your first think tank. And just very brief, I'm mindful that the think tanks is not about me. It's about whoever is in the room. But just a few things that I want to point out to in the run up to discussing the topic for today. Is some of you might have noticed that the think tanks has started getting a different focus and something that's closer to my heart in terms of using whatever is happening at the moment and has been happening for some time as an opportunity for change and for renewal, because we are not supposed to go back to the way things were. And some of you would know that I've said this many times, is that a lot of things that this pandemic is forcing us to focus on and to do differently, or things that we were supposed to attend to for the past even, you know, decade before COVID. And COVID is just propelling us to pay attention to that and not let this crisis go to waste. Like I said, this is not all about me. It is about people in the room. But since last week, because I've got some data that I can share that will speak to the topic, I do want to use that also to kind of get some ideas across and priorities across on this topic. So for some of you that don't know me, I think many people that's in the Harmony People networks and the Qatar HR network, I just want to ask something. Is there anybody here from the Qatar HR network today? Because I started posting that yesterday as well to see, you know, the reach. I'm not very good at social media posting to reach the wider audience, although I've got a good network. But I've been a little bit naughty, so I'm relying on other people to share and rope people into the think tanks. But just in terms of my background, I've got 10 years corporate experience, and then in 2001, I started consulting, and I'm also doing executive coaching. So I've moved across industries and companies and countries for quite a long time. And the HR value report, which I've said that I'm going to take some of the insights of the merge results, actually was originally developed as one of the customized solutions for a client. And then while I was developing, I thought, you know, I was an HR manager. I've worked in HR departments and alongside HR departments, and HR needs a tool to help them focus on what leaders expect and perceive of HR, and not just listen to what is the latest trends, etc. And I don't want to go into too much detail on that, but I do have some data that I want to show you in terms of leveraging HR technology. But before I do that, I want to start, and I said, you know, in posting about this think tank today, is the why, what, and how of HR technology, because I think it's important that we start with the why. For me, in terms of people, processes, etc., I think HR technology plays such an important role to not just help HR to be less operational and administrative, but it will also kind of enable the management of people processes where it should be, and that is not with HR. But let's just start with a why. And sorry, before we just jump in, I'm mindful that we've always said being open space, that we finish when we are done. So, and that's been great. So it's always been like 90 minutes to 120 minutes. I want us to try and kind of start and see if we can aim for an hour. Especially mindful as most people have returned to work, that they, you know, after an hour they might need to jump into another meeting. If we then after that, continue conversations. I'm more than willing to keep the think tank open, as I've always done. But let's try and aim for an hour, which means kind of shorter conversations. That includes for me, because communication is one of my strengths. So I'm not going and over communicate, etc. But let's start with the why. Why is it important to automate and digitize HR processes and in HR information for that matter? And I think today what we can do, just in the interest of time, either unmute yourself, start your video, or put something in the chat box. Because it's important that we don't just see this as a tick box exercise and something that everyone else does, so we need to do that too. Why is it important?
Hi, Liesl.
Hi, Donna. Welcome back.
Thank you. Here I am. I missed just the start of it. Were you explaining the difference between the automating and digitization, or did you say something different? I'm sorry, I missed.
No problem. No, we just did some brief intros for some of the people that wanted to. But the key question is, and you've been a past participant, so you haven't missed much. You know how I roll with the think tanks. So the question really is, why is it important? Let's start with that. Why is it important for us to automate and digitize HR processes?
I actually just looked up quickly before joining, because I hadn't had a chance earlier, just to identify what the differences were. And so, yeah, in HR, it does seem both of them are important or add value. The one thing that struck me was the automating side. I'm just looking at my notes here. Is about auto execution of tasks, but then that reduces the human intervention. So, you know, things like, I suppose, leave. I know there's already a lot of that being automated, so that would help, I think, with processing those kinds of things, salaries, attendance, with the biometrics or those kind of things could be automated. And then the digitization, it said about conversion of analog info into text, photos, or voice things. And so it's saying it's creating self-reliant business models that can be cost efficient and standardized quality. So honestly, I haven't had time to kind of think about that and why would it be important. But I think thinking of a business, digitizing, I'm not sure right now, my brain has kind of gone on a bit of a freeze. So I'm sure somebody else has something to say about that.
So my take on the whole digitization aspect, if you look at what's trending, people analytics or data reporting. So if we automate certain processes, obviously we have to look at what type of data or processes can be automated, and if it can be translated into meaningful data so that we as business partners or human capital professionals can then use that to make informed decisions that would feed the strategic objective of business. And also, back in the day, HR was seen as more of a performing an admin role where we, paperwork and all of that. And if you look at where things are heading, we're going to say employees to take control of their own data to make sure that it always remains accurate. And obviously move away from HR having to be the police people to make sure, hey, did you update your ID? Did you update your marital status? And then push that back to the employees so that our role can change and become a bit more, partner with business and see how we can remain relevant with times.
Awesome. Absolutely. Thanks, Adriana. And thanks, Donna, as well. I'm noticing a lot, and you know, you've all kind of touched on the essence why it is important. And a lot of you, including myself, you know, it means also freeing HR up. You know, I've seen with HR people, including when I do coaching, for example, is where someone is, you know, they think it's a performance issue that I need to coach someone on, but it's actually because the systems and the processes hasn't been automated and digitized, where the errors are creeping in. So the automation part of it is absolutely key to get away with automation, you know, to do automation, get away with the manual, repetitive work, push it where it needs to be, where leaders are responsible for managing people processes. You know, HR's role, in my, you know, is like the architecture of it, etc. But yes, and then the digitization part of it is about, if you are automating it and all the information and the processes are digitized, that's when you start getting the data that you can use for data-driven decisions. And not just past data. So it's also about, once you've got enough data, that you can actually, the move is towards predictive analytics. Now, the important thing for me is that is where HR starts building credibility. If HR can have the data and share and turn that into insights and data-driven decision-making, and can start demonstrating that, you know, this is what we predicted, this is what we need to do, and then kind of prove it right in time, that is also where leaders will come to HR to kind of be involved in those strategic conversations. Amina, that you've been pointing to in the chat box. So there's a lot of whys that's not only for the business and for the people and for leadership, but absolutely valuable for HR as well. Now, can you imagine, I mean, 20 years from now, a few companies that, you know, that went from manual payrolls to you know, automating it, etc. And can you imagine going into lockdown? And some companies actually did, and sometimes big companies, right? Not just the small ones. And then there were employee records, etc., that were at the office, and they weren't able to access that, right? I mean, that is, and if we know that virtual work and things like that is something that will stay and should, okay, for a number of reasons we've spoken to in previous think tanks, is that we know that we want to be able to access information anytime. We want people to take over ownership for changing their own important information, that the HR doesn't need to run around with forms. Okay, I still have companies, for example, doing hard copy surveys, you know, and then they end up, and then, you know, I see someone posting, they're looking for someone to please who can automate this, and the technology is there. Any builds on the why? And Edwina, you spoke to the what, and we will get to that as well, which would be, you know, the next question as to what do we need to automate and digitize.
Yeah, so our teams are looking at that at the moment. And the first platform we're saying is, you know, employee data. Because if we extract a headcount report from our internal systems, the data is 80% correct, but there's that 20% that the employee must maintain. So we're staying as a starting point is the employee data, and it feeds into our talent pipeline, because employees have many qualifications, but on our report it just shows a matric. So you can't actually make, you know, if we look at building your pipeline for succession planning for our leaders, if the data is incorrect. So that's the starting point.
Yes.
And then we're also looking at, because to our fortunate, you know, our employees can access, you know, we're introducing a lot of apps. So if it's an HR app where someone can go in and then they can see the whole history in terms of payslip. So they don't no longer have to contact HR to say, oops, send me my copy of my payslip. You know, they can go in and, you know, ease of reference be at home, and they can log in an app. We're also introducing, we also have to use the same app where our leaders are based. So if they want to engage with the leader, they can do so.
Absolutely. And you're currently introducing all of that.
Yeah, it's already implemented, but to change the mindset is a slow process because the participation rate is not that high. But we are putting our thinking hats on to say, you know what, let's see how we can get that participation. Because look, we will also the predictive analysis in terms of what you are speaking. We have put a team together that's looking at that, and we are introducing new human capital reports. We're saying, so if our last financial year we had a labor turnover rate of X according to the various occupational levels, what would be the potential attrition rate or labor turnover rate in the next 5 years? So we already, and we can also then pinpoint, just look at the scarce skills, and then we feed that into our OD department to make sure they get the information to then align their talent planning or org designs. So, but it's a slow process, and we're definitely on that journey where we tapping into these new terms and business. But I must say, our leaders are seeing the value, because they can say, oh, this is what our data is saying, our past data. Let's look at predictive analysis.
Absolutely. So I want us to come back to a lot of things that you've pointed to, Edwina, and it points to kind of the what and the how. And when we get to the how, it is very, very important that we also talk to this whole thing about, you say, you know, mindset change, but it's change management also, and the stumbling blocks. You know, how do we plan and move, you know, through those stumbling blocks and etc. to make it easier and workable for everyone. If everyone is okay with it, I just want to frame also the conversation. And when I go through this, I understand why. I just want to share with you some of the insights from the HR Value Report as it pertains to the automation and digitization of HR. If you are just going to bear with me for a brief moment. So I'm just mindful that I've got still my opening screen open here, and two different screens, which is not helping. 1 second. Let me just close this one. Just while I'm opening the right PowerPoint presentations, I can share that. Here you go. For some of you who don't know, this is from in-company participation. So these are participating companies where HR's key internal stakeholders, from first-line supervisor up to board of directors, are saying what do they expect and perceive of their HR department, HR function in their own organization. Response rate exceptionally high, which I always say points to leaders that actually understand how important HR is in the organization and want to have their voices heard. So I'm just going to share, and this is all merge results pre-COVID. Can I just check, can someone just voice, because I can't see any thumbs up, whatever. What are you seeing? Are you seeing my slide presentation? Just the one slide? Are you seeing the next slides as well? Because I'm working from 2 screens, so I'm just mindful.
Just one slide.
Are you seeing the one slide? Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so let me just go then to different screens. So the one area that the HR Value Report looks at is the role and performance of HR. So what do leaders expect and perceive of HR? Now just look at the right there, leveraging HR technology. I'm very surprised, because for me, that is one of the key roles of HR, because it's got a knock-on effect on the other things. is that together with HR as a business partner, a strategic business partner, came out as the least important. Now, I think this will change. COVID, I think, would change the results after this. Now, if we look at the blue bar on that in terms of performance, it's actually one of the better scores on performance. So 3.26 is actually, if you go there, that's a 3, and that is average. 4 in terms of importance is actually means that it is important. 5 is essential. If you then look at the gaps and HR's roles between importance and performance, leveraging HR technology had the smallest gap. Now, just so that you know, there are questions under leveraging HR technology. You know, that's a dimension. And I'm not going to go into detail with that, except that there's one thing where the insights jumped out. But all of these areas has got the basic roles of HR. So, and the emerging and future roles of HR as well. So leveraging HR technology, the very basic of that, which are the things that should have been in place by now, is to all HR processes to automate it, you know, so that it runs in an automatic way. The most kind of emerging role of HR is using the data that's in there for predictive analytics. So it spans across that. So it's interesting to know that there's not a big, it's the smallest gap across all HR's role in terms of what do leaders, how important they think it is, and what is HR's performance. Now, looking at what are HR's strengths in terms of the highest performance across all the roles across all the questions, the one that came out third of all those, and I've blanked out the rest, so you can focus on that, which is the strength of that participating HR functions, is to utilize technology to effectively administer employment conditions, records, and other HR administrative processes. Now that is the basic. That is kind of, you know, if you look at the evolution of HR's role, those are the things that should have been in place by now. So I'm not surprised that it is there, and it is also good to know that it is there. The other area that the HR Value Report measures is the interaction that leaders want and get from HR. Now, this is interesting because I think this will change. If you look at if they want less, the same, or more type of interaction with HR than compared to what they had in the previous 12 months, remember, this is pre-COVID, is they wanted, there were more people that said that they wanted to have visits to their workplace, face-to-face meetings and presentations to workshops, and most wanted the same or less audio conferences and video conferences. And you know, I need to tell you, we all were all in this together. That was what we had to do during lockdowns, is audio conferences and video conferences. So it's going to be interesting to see how this will change in terms of what they want in future, if that, especially in terms of audio conferences and video conferences, because more people have used it and experienced it and see that they actually can, you know, interact and get results through that. The other thing that the HR Value Report measures is asking leaders what external factors, what factors impacts HR's ability to add value. And the reason for asking that is because a range of questions there is that they can also start thinking, you know, what can we as leaders do to help HR in their role? Now, here I want to point out to you, I've just taken the ones that jumped out as the factors most negatively impact HR's ability to add value. 49%. Our company culture places more emphasis on HR's traditional role, e.g. admin, recruitment, and HR's value role. Why is this important? Because if that is the company culture and HR do not automate and digitize those traditional roles, which is still important, okay, according to the people. HR would love not to do that. I understand that. But if they don't do that, it is going to hold them back from doing the other things that most HR people actually do want to do. So I just thought about sharing those, because this is when what happens. Leaders love the feedback, CEOs and boards as well, because it really jumps out for them, and it tells them, you know, for example, that thing is true about the company culture. That is something that the CEO would need to start managing and shifting, you know, mindsets about what is the role of HR in our organization. Because HR can stand on their feet and shout and do all types of things, but if that is what the company culture forces them into, that is actually what they are going to deliver and be pulled into most of the time. So let me just stop there. And just ask you, what jumps out for you in terms of that? And maybe you want to speak to, you know, if those questions were asked in your own organization, would that be what you would see in your own results if your leaders would have participated in a survey like that? Or was it very different in your organization?
Hi, Lisa.
Right.
That report was very, very interesting to see. And as you say, it's the leaders were asked, and that those results, I think, are often not communicated very well to HR people. And in terms of this leveraging technology, you know, the 49% there does mean there's a lack of understanding of the value of the data that, you know, could be presented. I'm just thinking from an accountant's perspective, they look at data. The data tells a story, and actually that story is a past story, a current story, and helps with a future story. So yeah, I mean, I've worked in larger organizations before, and that was years ago, and I think things have changed a great deal, but maybe not as much as it needs to do move to this technology, the automating, the whichever one is needed for each task, and that, you know, the fact that the company culture, you know, places more emphasis. It means then it's either a lack of understanding of the person in HR, or it's a lack of understanding of the leaders of how much more HR can actually contribute to the business objectives through the analysis of the data. So because we primarily work with your small, medium businesses, many of them are reluctant, don't know about the advancement of these different apps that Edwina mentioned, and they would battle, I think, initially to identify with the change that is in the interest of the organization as well. And I mean, straight away, as you've been speaking and what you've been sharing, I could see the benefits even with small, medium businesses. And, you know, the most common comment you get from business owners, you know, what is the most frustrating or concerning aspect of your business? And it's about people. So, and I don't think it's just about individuals and personalities. I think it's actually, you know, they need information to know how to make their decisions or contribute to their decisions. So yeah, I'm just, you know, listening to this, and that value report is great value. And I think it actually can help HR practitioners, HR managers, to actually use that kind of the knowledge that you've just shared is in terms of strategizing their own role in an organization or with a business, that kind of thing. because it does emphasize, how this information can clearly tell a story, and also because the leaders, the CEO, the managers, that kind of thing, they're very focused on the financial information, and that comes in a report. So why not use what they're used to looking at, and helps them make decisions and present HR stats in a similar way.
No, absolutely. I just want to quickly comment on two things that you've said, Donna. Two things is, one, HR does not participate in completing the survey, but they get feedback, and I workshop the feedback. Okay, one. Two is the smallest organization who participated in this is someone that's got one HR person. The biggest is a company that's got 70 HR people.
Wow.
So it is the wide scope. What I want to ask out there, who of everyone that's in the room, who of you have believe that you are kind of 80% there in terms of automation and digitization of HR processes and information? Just to kind of tell me, because I just wanted to ask a question about that and kind of get an idea of what it looks like in your business. Anyone who believes they are kind of well in their journey? Anyone? Who is mid in the journey? No one. Okay, so we can all learn from each other. No one. So maybe in the chat box, percentage-wise, where are you in your company in terms of automation and digitization of HR processes? 10, 20, 0, 50, 70? Anyone?
So it's difficult to put a percentage to it because our company are always automating things or coming up with new ways. So it's actually part of, I would say, our way of work. Or they look for projects when it comes to the new financial year to see what's the next best thing to add value. So it's actually difficult to say if it's a 30% or 60%, but it's always being done.
Okay.
Hi.
Yes, Eunice.
I agree with Edwina, because what do you measure it against? So if we have a measure that we can, compare it against, then we could say, yes, we're 40% or 50%. But I think we have done quite some great strides in our business. I mean, we have bots that we used recently. We have quite a number of technology apps where staff can actually use. They can use their phone. We have mobile apps and stuff. So I think we are quite far compared to other organizations. But there's clearly a long way to go still if we compare to the bigger companies.
Okay, but that's great. And I'm hearing, kind of really nice things there as you've been speaking. When you're speaking to bots, about bots, you're already far ahead. So this is a good opportunity. Let's start talking about, we've talked about the why. Let's talk about the what. Okay, what are the things that can be automated and digitized? And again, just kind of bottom line it, it can either be, the answers to that can either be what have you in your own organization automated and digitized, or it could be, what still needs to be done. And you're welcome to speak to that. Especially I would love to hear, from people that's been doing this in their own organization, what have you automated and digitized? Anybody else is welcome to drop their ideas in the chat box.
So from our side, we have recently launched the digital recruitment, where we have bots that ask the questions, and then candidates can then apply, and then later on we can then go on and then review the recruitment. So that's some of the stuff that we have automated.
Okay, and what results and impact has that had on HR and on leaders?
So I can answer because myself, Eunice is my colleague.
Okay.
Just by the way. So, so we have received good feedback from business leaders. So with the e-recruit system, so it's a typical, you start the questions, reads, you start, say, okay, this is the answer. So we ask competency-based questions or technical questions, and then they press stop again. So then every time you view a video, and then you can rate, the stars, like a typical, if you have to review a blog, then you give like a 5-star rating or a 4-star rating, and then the system saves it. And that is stored on a database. And it also has the functionality. So if that same person wants to apply for a different role, another person can go in and view to get an understanding of the employee's journey, where they're at and what are the interests, and whether this person can be scheduled for another potential role. So it's received, and what that process does is that the applicant is not stressed out to take time off from work, don't burn their bridges with their current employer. They can actually go online in the evening. Obviously, they need to have a laptop with a camera facility and all of that, and make sure there's nice equipment, a standard interview environment, but they can do it in their own time. We've also done the technical assessments, to test technical expertise. We use Zoom, so we have a virtual Zoom. The invigilator is online for an hour. Typical assessment environment. Before the assessment, we send you the technical assessment. You log in, you complete, you send back, and then it's moderated. So we also introduced, we signed documents via PDF, where leaders and employees have digital signatures. So we minimize the, having to print a document and then sign and then scan back in. We don't have that. We send a Word document, you save in PDF, sign in PDF, and then you attach. We have our HRI system that we link it directly to, and then it's immediately put on your file. So everything is digital, and we minimize the hands that gets involved with or the equipment being used. So those are some of the things you are using. And then we also recently introduced, like I said, we are with part of the medical aid industry. If you send an SMS, or you can log onto an app, if you need an authorization for a procedure, you just select to say, I want to go for this, and then you get your authorization, it's approved. So we are, as opposed to having to call, staying on the line for 15 or 10 minutes because it's high volume, just to get the same outcome. So we are looking at ways of how to improve our processes. But obviously, this is obviously more our products and services, which forms part of the core of our business, and not necessarily looking at the employee component. So that's where our focus is also looking at.
Awesome, and I'm curious, in the industry that you're in, because the kind of the companies already, if you're medical industry, aid industry, and I'm not sure for which company, but knowing most of them, they would have automated and digitized a lot of their processes with regards to their members. So it's very likely to be easier to kind of influence and get investment necessary for internal HR processes, right? It's easy, and I think I'm already hearing that, seeing that you are regularly looking at the budget for that and doing and putting new things in place that you can.
But the challenge is, so this is all and well, and it's great, the company will remain financially stable. But the most important aspect is the employee. Because obviously their mindset is still paper, their mindset is HR still coming, it's classroom environment. Let's speak about the leave policy. So yes, all this wonderful things is happening, and we hitting the nail with our members or our clients. But when we have to bring it back home, there is a portion of our workforce that is aligned with this vision, that's moving forward. But then there's a bulk that's very paper driven. And obviously we need to understand the generations of our workforce.
Yes.
And that's why we're trying to understand what do we need to do differently to close that gap. So obviously, digitization, automation is one avenue. But the employee itself is also a challenge.
Just that last part, I didn't hear all the words. The employee
is also a challenge because you have different generations of employees within the company.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I'm here, you know, I'm of a certain generation, but I'm technology, you know, I'm kind of a super user in terms of that, but it's definitely a challenge for some. And hence I'm very curious to see how, you know, not just culture, but how something like this will change as we get more critical mass of new generations coming in here who just so easily adopts technology. Etc. I want to ask a question, Edwina, in terms of, you know, this resistance, because this is not just now. I've seen it, you know, for 2 decades, as people being resistant to not just the technology part of it, but, you know, just doing things that they've just so used to doing in a certain way. And in this case, you know, paper-based systems or whatever, it's Excel, etc. And then moving on to something new. Is it just a generational thing from your perspective? That's one question. The second question is, you know, is HR feeding that resistance to change by just, you know, giving and helping and not just stopping and saying, but this is the new way. We're replacing this with this. And that was probably a very direct question, and maybe Fran doesn't answer, but it is a question.
So it's not to offend anyone, because I don't know where the audience is with the generations. But remember, each generation was accustomed to certain revolutionary aspects as part of the career journey. So I was still studying or in high school when the internet came out. So obviously whoever worked at that stage was exposed to that. But that would be the first answer. So it depends where you're at. You were exposed to certain technological advancements. But as things are progressing and where our clients or competitors are going, things are changing. And if you're still within a, you know, part of a workforce, you have to, I won't see it as force alignment or having to, you know, adhere to these changes. But it is a way of being, and it is a way that's going to actually pay your salary at the end of the day. And if I look at where the big companies are going, you know, small SMEs they might be not as fast with the transitioning or the changes, but they will eventually get there. So it's entirely up to you. If you don't want to change, then you will have to go find a company that are pushing paper, where they print and going to sign. And obviously, then you will obviously go to another company. I don't know. But if you want to stay relevant and you want to see where your career is going, because obviously HR 20 years ago versus HR now has changed. And leaders are coming up with new or with new theories or new books or new ways of doing. And it's all about being sustainable at the end of the day. So what HR is doing, it's not feeding the resistant employee. They have a major challenge of helping them to understand why things are changing. So it's almost like giving that business intelligence to help them understand strategy and where they are part of that strategy. And that has always been the foundation in any company. If you start a job, this is your role, and this is how you feed to the end result. So it's obviously, if the company is going automation and digitization, is to help them understand this is how your role is transitioning to the new vision of the company. And this is how your skill set is changing and how you are growing. And if you have to go back to study now 20 years later, you will see that what is written in textbooks has changed. So obviously it's about changing with the times, unfortunately. And this is the reality of the economy, of businesses. So it's all about how you position it to your staff at the end of the day and help them educate and obviously communication platforms. If I look at my 3-year-old daughter, she's already screening YouTube, singing along, whereas we would have viewed back in the day, watch TV series to do the same, to get the same outcome.
Yeah.
So it's all about the positioning and helping them understand why we need to transition towards remaining feasible and competitive, and being able to still have a job and still pay your salary.
No, absolutely, and you know, all what you said, I'm now fully agree. And when I'm speaking to, you know, HR, helping them is if we always think that, you know, it's a generational thing, and if people come to us and say, look, they don't want to change their employee records because they don't understand technology, and HR just does that for them without helping them, you know, that it's not going to change, you know, how they do things. I just want to kind of illustrate with an example why I don't always think it is a generational thing. And very much, Edwina, speaking to your why, you know, giving them a why. There need to be a compelling reason for them to use technology and leveraging it from the user perspective. When we moved abroad to the Middle East, who is now 87 years old mother, so let's say she was 76, whatever, who's never used a computer in her life, suddenly realized she needs to go on Facebook and Skype if she wants to continue communicating with us and her grandchildren, who was then 8 years old at that stage. And she resisted it, and I just kind of gave her, and I said, this is how you're going to communicate with her. And I kind of coached her and helped her, and she used it. It was sometimes a little bit of a struggle, but not always, because she had a compelling reason why she had to use technology for the first time in her entire life, being 70 something and generation. I think she's past boom, right? Baby boomers. If you look during COVID, a lot of people in lockdown who never had a big enough reason to do online shopping started doing it. Okay, even though they were not technology kind of people, you know, look at Facebook, for example. You know, more people that's kind of in their mid-career and grandparents, whatever, are using Facebook now, like, than the younger generation. Why? Because it made life for them personally. You know, there might be a lot of personal reasons, and I think that's important. You know, speaking to that point and to your point about, you know, there needs to be a reason for them to want to do it. And yes, then there's the want, and then there's the skills as well. You need to give them the skills to do it. You need to manage change, mindset, attitude, and all of that as well, which is also the role of HR. What else have you automated and digitized? It sounds like the recruitment process. Have you done something similar with employees? Let's say there's an internal vacancy. For example, if you're in a big organization, you probably want to throw open, you know, in terms of succession planning, career development, the opportunity for anyone to apply for any position in the organization. Have you used the same processes for them?
We've only recently started to use the e-recruit platform. There's another product that we are reviewing, which is similar to the current one that we're using. So this is still in trial phase, but it's working. We are getting very good reviews from this. And it will definitely move away from, like I previously mentioned, you know, having to take off from work and all of that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I would love to hear from the other people as well. What have you automated and digitized in your business organization? No one? So I see Toby, filing system, digitized. So I'm curious to know from you, Toby, is it something that's running on a cloud-based system? Is it, what is it? Just an internal system? And how has it helped your organization? Sorry, and I'm going to need to put my earphones on because someone is starting to, I don't know, do something that's very noisy. I don't know if you can hear it.
Hi. So
Yeah.
I used to work for Telesure, which is auto in general. I left to start my own company, but right there, we kind of like digitalize the filing system, also recruitment system, but the filing system was mostly in terms of when people, pretty much what you're doing, like when you apply for something, then you hand in everything, your certified document and everything via internet, so that we have everything, and the documents get filed digitally instead of a person having to come up with a CV, certified documents, and all different types of documents. So it was just minimizing putting things in a file. So when you also leave forms, they were all put in a digital space. Take leave authorization, they all go into digital space. A resignation letter, that went into the digital space. But I know Edwina spoke about authorization. Sometimes when it went into digital, some of our managers would forget, or they would not read their email, so they would miss the email. So they missed some of the resignations, they missed some of the leave forms. So ending up with people getting even paid after they've resigned or something like that. So it was good to digitalize a lot of things and to put a whole lot of processes on the system, but it came with its huge errors at the same time. So yeah, even our assessment process, we've put consent forms, yeah, like what Edwina also spoke about, signatures, forms were all digital.
I think I can add, we've done that already. Sorry, we've done that already in terms of our assessment center doing virtual assessments, also digital. We've done our onboarding process also digital. We even have one of our other, I would say, areas of the business have an onboarding program. So everything that was normally done face-to-face is now done via app. Onboarding was done. I think the whole termination process, to avoid what Tapia experienced, it starts with the line manager. So as soon as you get the resignation letter, you do something on the system to prompt the termination process, and everything is automated. So everything is systems driven.
Yes.
And if systems is down, we can't do anything.
Which hopefully doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah, but you know, with everyone using Wi-Fi or 3G cards, you know, if the base systems, if there's something going down with cables, it affects everyone working from home at the end of the day. And that's something we cannot, you know, we don't know how to solve for that. All we can say is just bite the bullet until we're back online.
Yeah, or some systems I think you can do offline, and hopefully when everything comes back, you haven't lost it. There's two things that Tapi and Edwina, you point to. And the one thing is that, you know, it's the workflow attached to it. I mean, kind of putting something on the central record without your system forcing the right procedure and the workflow is not automation. The only thing it does is to take something that's normally in a hard copy and putting it into electronic copy, one. Two, in my mind also, putting something in and scanning it or whatever and putting it onto the cloud or a central database is also not automation and digitization, because so this is the difference. So if you, let's say you have a resignation letter, maybe this is not the best of examples, and all you do is you just scan it and put it in there, but it's not fields that goes and sits somewhere. You can never turn that into data. I mean, for this to turn into data, you actually need to have fields that with text or with numbers or whatever, so that you can start merging that, and that will turn it into data. So that's definitely something that HR needs to have a look at, if they haven't, is to move kind of beyond just, you know, the record keeping, whatever of it. And, you know,
So,
mm,
so speak to that. So we partner with our development team, our BI developers for our systems. So whatever new functionality we introduce, we always make sure that it's linked to our reports. So like for example, we have something we employees, like part of the employee self-service. If we get a report of the amount of requests or the type of requests that they've put through. Maybe they've done a marital change themselves, you know, or they updated their own. So we get that data at the end of the month, and we can see, you know, is employees using the employee self-service. And if we put our new app, we also get a report to say, you know, how many of our business unit has accessed the app and what type of data. So what I'm trying to say is whatever intervention we come up with, or you know, new way of work, we always make sure that we can get a report, because remember, we are very high on the whole predictive analysis and see how we're adding value and how we can simplify things for our staff.
absolutely. Absolutely wonderful. Speaking about predictive analytics, and I just want to kind of illustrate that with an example. What is predictive analytics, and could it be? And the difference between, you know, storing something in paper, whatever, or kind of having something that it is basically data in a system that you can then turn into insights. Taking exit interviews, for example, how many of you are doing exit interviews in your company, and how many of you are actually leveraging that as data? Anyone?
Sorry, we actually also had that where I was part of the whole thing of making sure that it's actually a form on a system, and you ask question on the system, and they fill in within the system, and we did that.
Okay, and then and do you use the merged results from the exit interviews?
Yes, we used to study the exit interviews, study the assessment system. We gave it even numbers to turn some of the information into numbers, whereas some of it we couldn't, so we had to do some other analytics.
Okay, not reverse analytics, because I've sometimes seen that as well. The questionnaire is not structured, you know, rightly with the right questions, then people try to kind of force it into their own way, whatever, after the fact. Okay, but that's awesome. And who else? I see Denise is doing exit interviews on Microsoft Forms. Are you turning that, Denise, into analytics and predictive analytics? Denise, are you there? No. Okay. But just to kind of take that as an example, because that is something, you know, that I've also developed as TechSet, outsourced online exit interviews. But to give you an example, because it asks the right questions across different fields, and you can merge that result, etc. And you can kind of get insights as to, for example, why someone is leaving, where they're going, what are the reasons, etc. Why did they join in the first place, you know, and why they're leaving now? And once you start merging that, so predictive analytics, for example, is if you start to find out that all your 20-year-old Black female engineers tend to leave because they're relocating, okay, to another country, for example. you can start, when you start recruiting for that, you can kind of, start building that into your recruitment processes, or kind of to understand is why they do that, and manage the whole onboarding and everboarding process better when data start jumping out. And it's not just data of one person leaving, you start merging data. And that is what predictive analytics is. When you start being able to turn data and start to predict, is this person, for example, likely to leave? Etc. So that's another example what I want to speak to. The other thing is, and I'm mindful, everyone's still happy to continue the think tanks, or the think tank today. Well, normally I don't ask when it's this time. People just leave, and when I'm the only one here, which sometimes happen after 2 hours, I end it. Something I want to speak to is cloud-based. Now, Edwina and Eunice, it sounds to me you've got a cloud-based system in place that's absolutely the whole workflow is automated, right? Is it self-developed, or did you use another company for that? Another system?
So I speak under correction. So certain of the things it's in-house, and I think they do use certain developers for certain things. So I'm not sure what lies where
Okay.
from a system perspective.
100%. Okay, so one of the questions that I sometimes see in organizations, if they've got legacy systems in place and they're sticking to those legacy systems, and whereas there are so many nice new systems that are available out there, and it's kind of holding them back, and they just keep on putting money with the legacy systems, whereas it eventually costs them more. Is anybody else have had experience of that?
From our side, I don't think so. I think our business is quite open. As Edwina has mentioned, they're quite open. They continuously search for new things, new processes, new systems. So they are quite aware of what's out there. And the system that we have is really amazing. And I know there is definitely different competition, other systems that's on the same level, but it's how you use your system that actually has an impact. If it has the right, if it hit the right spots, basically.
Yes. No, absolutely. So here's another question: is that 20 years ago, people tend to change systems around to fit their purpose, their processes. In my opinion, the times have changed. There are such great systems out there that will actually make your processes easier. That I think, in the day and age that we live in now, is that many of these systems can actually force us to do things quicker and in a different way. Okay, what are your views on that? Anyone?
So there's a big cost implication. So, and normally, I think Eunice can concur with this, is to look at, if you have to change your system and you work for a big corporate, it has a massive cost implication. But if you can maybe look at a component, that you can use, I think that would be more suitable for big corporates.
Okay, and what do the others say? What have you seen work or doesn't work?
Liesl, if you don't mind sharing with us, what are those systems that's out there that's quite making an impact in the human capital field? Because that's some of the information that I would like to know. What are these systems? What is the new trends that's actually out there above what we already have in our space?
Yes, and I don't know what you have, okay, what you currently put in place. I'm going to be honest with you, is that there are so many systems out there that serve so many different purposes, whatever. Personally, I am for, mapping at the beginning what it is that we're looking for. I would be looking at a system that can automate and digitize everything, the whole process from, pre-onboarding to post-exit. And that you can, depending on where you are and what your need and budget is, that you can start putting, different perspective in place. And there are systems like that. And then there are a load of apps that serve different purposes. And for me, it would be all about integration. Now, I wouldn't want to mention specific systems on this platform. I've got something, I don't work with the systems, but I work on the peripheral. And because I feel so strongly about that, this is the first things that HR needs to put in place. Automation, the digitalization of HR processes. And then the second thing, leadership development times 100, etc. So I've got something that I want to start doing around your question about what is out there, because I know of a few of it, and it will probably take me a year to run through all of them. So yeah, I wouldn't want to punt anything here, a specific thing, because I know that there are so many more systems out there. I can kind of see from the sideline if you've got budget, because it's expensive,
Yes.
which is the one that I like from the site. I can point you to that from what I've seen, and they're growing globally, and they've got a South African presence now as well since I moved back, because when I moved back I wanted to get in touch with them, and then they didn't have a South African presence, but now they do. But then there are so many other factors that companies are using for different purposes. I think you need to start with your criteria. So for me, cloud-based, is important if you want to push this to the users of the system. Integration across all HR processes. And even if you decide, like the system, for example, that I'm thinking in my mind, and it's change management, is if you've got the system that's got the capacity to do everything automated, and the process flow with it, and the records, which has then got the data, right, that you can turn into insights and decision making. You can then decide, look, we only want to do this now, then we want to do that. Like one of the companies that have implemented this last year, I was presenting at a conference, and I when I spoke about the Texas outsource exit interviews, a company was interested to bring that to their company, and they've implemented this system that I'm thinking in my mind. And they said, in hindsight, they wished they only did this module, because they broke, they bit too much. Is that the right word? In the beginning, they're trying to put the whole thing in place, and they wish in hindsight that they just chunked it. Put it in place, got it working, then move on to the next, which I think to an extent, Edwina and Eunice, you are doing, it sounds to me. You're chunking it and putting, some things in place, and then move on to the next. And I assume with all of that, you are ensuring that there's integration across these systems. I mean, you wouldn't want to have a performance management system that doesn't speak to your succession planning, that doesn't speak to your competency model, whatever.
Yeah. And I think our system really does that quite well. I think most of us are quite surprised on what the system actually, more than ever now, is offering us, stuff that we were not aware of. But since things are moving so fast, there's definitely lots of opportunities on the system. It feels like we have a gold mine that we haven't mined for a long time.
Okay, well, that's really great to know, because if you've got a gold mine, you've got a mine that you can mine. I think that some people just throwing money into a mine, a deep hole, and not delivering any diamonds, but they just keep on throwing money at a system that is like a really, really old gold mine. Whatever, etc. So that is something that, because that you can work with. The other thing that's really important, I get the feel that you've got that in place, is user experience. I mean, it doesn't help if you've got a system that does all these things, but the user experience is not great, because users will then not use it. And it doesn't sound like that's a challenge with yours.
Well, since it is only us left, we at that
100%.
stage where we really need to start